The water is fine, come on in. How can companies best determine when to take the plunge with quantum and to chart a path? Over to you, Evanna, and your panelists. Thank you.
Dump me down the end.
Okay.
What about diversity? Come on, let's...
Well, thank you for joining the session. I'm really delighted to be hosting this. For two reasons. I'm on my quantum journey and really have enjoyed all of the sessions so far today. But also, I do like to jump into a very cold sea at Brighton. And in the winter, it often takes a lot of encouragement to jump in. So I either have my friends telling me to do it, that the water is fine, or else they're saying, here's what you need to watch out for. And that's what my panelists are going to talk about today. How do companies make the best decision or the decision to jump in, to plunge in? And what are the things that they need to think about? What are the key traps, the catches, as they'd say, and how to chart those? So without further ado, I'd like my panelists just to introduce yourselves, and then we'll come on to, I think we've got Nikolaj also, who's dialing in.
Shall I go first? Gosh, okay. So I'm a partner in Amadeus Capital Partners, which is a deep tech fund, and my name is Manjari Chandran-Ramesh. I'm an engineer by background. I did my PhD in machine learning in Oxford on a Rhodes Scholarship, but then got very interested during my venture career in quantum, and so in my last role, I set up the portfolio at IP Group, and now I work for Amadeus Capital Partners, which has a portfolio in quantum. And I think both IP Group and Amadeus invested in quantum well before the hype, well before it became cool to invest in quantum.
Awesome.
Alan Russell, I head up drug discovery for large molecules for Amgen, the world's largest independent biotech company. I joined Amgen out of academia, where I'd spent most of my career at Carnegie Mellon University, so I learned a little bit about computing there before coming to Amgen a couple of years ago.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jonathan Legh-Smith from BT. I'm Principal for Scientific Affairs. I'm responsible for BT's engagement with the UK's strategic research and innovation priorities. I've been engaged with the National Quantum Technology Programme for the last 5 or 6 years, I think. Possibly my first encounter was when Roger, who will introduce himself, perhaps wisely, perhaps not, invited industry to give the presentation to Sir Patrick Vallance and Sir Mark Walport, bidding for the funding for phase 2 of the programme, which was a little while ago. BT's primary interest is in quantum secure communications, but we do also have interest in quantum computing, where we expect to be an advanced user, if not bleeding edge, and also quantum sensing in terms of the civil engineering side of our work. Thank you.
Roger McKinlay, I head up the industry-facing bit of the UK's National Quantum Tech Programme. We call it the Challenge, and I'm called the Challenge Director. That was the job I went into. It wasn't named after me. Okay. So.
And if we could come on to Nikolaj.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Wonderful. So I'm the Chief Digital Officer at WM here in the US. WM is a environmental services company. We pick up and dispose of a variety of waste types. We're an $18 billion company, 50,000 people across 1,200 locations, and operate a large fleet of approximately 22,000 vehicles. My responsibilities extend to everything from WM.com to information technology, cyber, and enterprise analytics and data management. And it's really that last bit that has me interested in quantum. We're in the process of building some quite sophisticated, we call them route automation algorithms. We would call them, I think, route automation algorithms in the UK. And we are exploring quantum as an avenue for potentially improving both the quality of the answer and getting to an answer faster.
Awesome. So I think a number of the audience here really want to know, what's the most difficult thing about this? What pushed you to make a decision to get involved in quantum? And I guess maybe a question to Alan. What have been your key learnings, really, in jumping in and plunging into the quantum side of things? And if you may indulge me, if you could focus on the things that you've learned from what you would do differently today What didn't work that well? What are the things that people need to watch out for?
So maybe I'll just talk briefly about three things: surfing, yo-yos, and use cases. In our industry, in the drug discovery industry, patients are suffering and dying while we wait for us to find new science. So every day someone's coming with something that will transform our industry. And we hear that a lot. And we've heard it a lot from the quantum computing industry. I think for us, one of the biggest challenges is simply deciding in that wave of science, that is the quantum industry wave, when are we ready to stop watching waves and start surfing them? And when we start surfing them, what are the surfboards that we should ride? So I think for us, in that sense, there's real risk. You have to find the right partner, and the right partner needs to understand that our industry is also evolving very rapidly, maybe even more rapidly than quantum computing. So the two things need to merge. We need to be ready for you, and you need to be ready for us at roughly the same time. So picking the surfboard and then allowing us to guide the surfboard through the waves of our own industry, very important. Yo-yos, we do get a lot of people offering us new transformations, so there's a lot of shiny objects that we could be paying attention to. And there is a tendency in our industry and many others to pay a short amount of attention to each shiny object and then stop paying attention as soon as something goes wrong. So there's this yo-yo effect of, oh, we're all in, oh, well, it didn't really work as we thought it would, so we're not all in anymore, and then repeat. And that can be very frustrating for partners and frustrating for us. So I think we have to commit for the long term. We have to just expect, we have to make a fundamental decision that this is it. And then during partnership, during collaboration, the key obviously is to pick the right use cases. This is really difficult, right? Because we are really good at what we do already. So finding those nuggets, those areas where we don't think we're going to improve within 5 to 10 years, and there are very few of those. Now, I'll just give you one example. Just from the implementation of an AI and machine learning platform in our biologic therapeutic drug discovery business this year, we've halved our timeline and doubled our success rate. So, our industry is using advanced computing very effectively already. We need to pick the right use cases, or we won't be able to prove the value, and that's key. So those would be the three things, I think, surfing, yo-yos, and use cases.
I love it. Nikolaj, it'd be interesting to hear your perspective as a Chief Digital Officer, what your key learnings are. And, you don't need to talk about surfing, yo-yo, and use cases, but it'd be really nice to hear your perspective.
Yeah, I would say we are early on in the journey, arguably earlier than my esteemed peers there on stage. We started exploring the use of quantum in the November, December timeframe last year. We've got a number of very sort of heavy computational challenges on our hands, including, as I mentioned earlier, some root automation algorithms we're in the process of creating for our roll-off line of business. So just to give you a little bit of context, when you think about, running a fleet of trucks that pick up and dispose of a variety of waste traps, there's an awful waste types. There's an awful lot you need to know about that waste to be able to dispose of it efficiently. It's about 70 attributes that we need to understand to be able to appropriately route, the right driver and the right truck to the right pickup point. And when you take into account the sheer number of customers that we're serving on a daily basis, there are quite literally quintillions of possible permutations of pickup in any given city that we need to contemplate. You're talking about millions and millions and millions of possible permutations. And that's a math problem that's relatively straightforward to solve with traditional computing when you're planning a route for the next day, but it becomes much more complicated when you are trying to optimize intraday. In other words, a customer calls and says, look, can you pick me up today? Or I've got a different waste type, or I want a different type of container. And so the prospect of quantum was quite interesting. I think about it in very simple terms as I have the potential to improve both the quality of the answer and the speed of the answer. Of course, the big question is, does the quality and the speed of the answer outweigh the cost associated with refactoring all my traditional algorithms and moving forward. That's an answer that we don't yet have. So I would say that we're in the stage of learning. Learning is a stage that I love, frankly, but I would say it's particularly challenging in the area of quantum. There aren't a lot of people, I would say, that we've had exposure to on the WM side, and I'm surrounded by, I would argue, some of the smartest people in the business, PhDs from some of the best universities who truly understand quantum, and they want to go deep and they want to understand. And it's been quite remarkable how few quantum experts have been able to explain quantum in ways that some of these very smart men and women can truly comprehend and understand. And so that's one of the challenges. The next challenge is going to be to actually demonstrate that we can unlock the kind of value that we're excited about, and we'll know that probably in 6 months' time.
Thank you, Nikolaj. Questions come into the audience that I think is relevant to what you just spoke about, and that's working with the quantum specialist. How easy did you find that, and the iteration towards potential applications?
It's my very first meeting with the quantum experts. They started with a very complicated PowerPoint slide deck with a lot of very fancy looking charts. And I've studied stats. I do understand math, arguably surrounded by people who understand it better than I do. But I will say it was over my head, as well as some of the others in the room. And so about 5 minutes into the meeting, I asked them if they were familiar with the movie Margin Call, which is one of my favorite movies, which features an English actor, I forget his name, as a CEO of a company that's trying to understand why their financial institution is on the brink of collapse. And he's faced with an analyst who is trying to read a report in very complicated terms, and he wants to slow him down and have it explain it in simple terms. And he says, and I quote, "Speak to me as if I were a young child or a golden retriever." And that is sort of the line that I used with these quantum experts. They came back second time round with a much simpler, I think, to understand presentation, but arguably there's still a question of what is this really? There are many that can read the theory and regurgitate the theory of quantum. I've read countless articles, but I think there's a difference between reading and being able to regurgitate and really understanding. And I would say the big challenge for the technical experts out there is to help relatively lay people understand the magic behind the curtain, so that they're more inclined to buy in and support.
Awesome. Great answer. Thank you. We're going to come on now, I think, to what we've seen work well. So I'm interested, Manjari, in your opinion, and based on what you've seen, what do you think are the critical success factors? What's worked well in terms of quantum?
So I think if I look back, we got involved in quantum in 2015, 2016. So slightly earlier than others, but not as early as Roger, perhaps. It's really, I think, what's worked well is the collaboration that Michael spoke about in his previous talk. So I think Innovate UK, partnering with these companies, venture investing in these companies. But as a deep tech investor, we get involved so early stage that we can't be funding every aspect of the company. Equally, government can't be funding every aspect of the company as well. So it has to be a collaboration. And I think in quantum especially, that has worked very well. So our portfolio, we've got Riverlane, which is doing operating systems for error-corrected quantum computers. There's New Quantum, which is revolutionizing quantum networks. We've got a hardware company. We've also got CryptoSense, which is looking at cryptography post-quantum world. So all these companies have really been able to come up to the stage that they are right now because of that combination of both the government funding, the Innovate UK funding, as well as the venture funding. So I think that's been a huge help and a key learning, I think, in a way the industry can work. The other aspect I'd sort of say is talent. I think, good people attract good people. So if I again look at the portfolio, the CEO of Riverlane, Steve Briley, or the CEO of New Quantum, Carmen, are just such powerhouses that others want to work with them. And I think that makes a huge difference to the whole community. And last but not least, I definitely go back to the use cases The successful companies are ones that have that one eye on the product. Now, quantum is in its nascency for sure. It is still a lot of research, but equally, unless the companies have that eye on what is it going to do for the end user, the chances of success are a lot lower. And again, I think Riverlane, New Quantum, and CryptoSense are doing brilliantly in that aspect.
And in terms of a question in from the audience, the time horizons that you'd expect to see returns on, which is quite a tricky question, I guess. But how patient can people afford to be in terms of the investment that they may make?
I think, Amadeus has been around for 25 years and has been a technology investor for 25 years. So we kind of know, and we pride ourselves on that. We're looking at waves. As I said earlier, before it becomes cool to invest. Amadeus has a huge portfolio in AI and machine learning, and that happened well before everybody was investing in AI and machine learning. So I think there are ways to handle that whole time horizon to make it work for the fund, but also be part of these exciting companies' journeys.
And if you're not in, you can't win, right?
Yeah.
You'll always say that, right? If we can come on then, I think, let's get to the position where we're trying to convince senior executives that they need to do this. I guess, Jonathan, if I can put the question to you, what are the myths that we think those senior executives need to overcome really in terms of the capability of quantum, and how do you overcome these?
Okay, so I think it's probably myths and mystery to quantum. I noticed Nikolaj didn't share the magic story that helped him get in. Perhaps you'd share that another day. But actually getting over what quantum is can be a challenge, and I do not have a perfect answer to that bit. So if we stick to the myths side, I guess the largest one is possibly that it is not something to worry about now. Hopefully, and if we look around the audience, we're past the will it ever happen, but we're probably still in the, well, when will it happen? And therefore, when should I be putting my resources on working this out? If we perhaps assume that taking the vendor's answers at face value isn't quite right for the execs, then the next step really, of course, is to talk, either to look at what competitors are doing. Are they looking to get an advantage over for when quantum computers, I'm talking specifically about quantum computing here, I'm going to come on in a moment. Are they getting an advantage, or talking to your trusted partners? So I'm based in BT's Applied Research HQ up at Industrial Park, and we have executive teams visiting all of the time. And we are always being asked to explain, two things. One is sustainability, which I notice is a conference coming up. That conversation has changed over the last few months. And the other is quantum. What are we doing about quantum, and what do we think about it? And so we talk about our practical experiences in applying quantum computing to our problems. Usually I would say we have 20,000 vehicles on the UK roads, and that's a bit of a problem. But again, Nikolaj has a slightly more complex problem by the sounds of it, so we may catch up later. But we're looking at classic optimization problems. But we also talk about what we have really been looking at within BT, which is quantum secure communications, because obviously there are lots of benefits to quantum computing, but there is a well-known threat challenge associated with it, which is the threat to our current encryption technologies. And within BT, we have always believed that, yes, we can look ahead to the solution that will be post-quantum crypto, but there is something that we can do now, and that is to start securing data in transit, providing secure communications to ensure that we're at least protecting our customers against the store now and hack later. So we've been focusing our efforts on quantum secure communications, QKD specifically, and this is the kind of thing we talk to our customers about when they come to visit. Possibly the headline, though, is, I'm delighted the Minister mentioned it, it was at the end of April that we announced the world's first commercially viable trial of QKD. I say world's first because you may have heard lots of deployments, but this is a real commercial deployment, full operational surround as if it was the commercial service. And those sorts of things do engage customers. EY is our founding customer that. We're working with Toshiba as our technology vendor. And I should say Arkit as well on a separate thing around satellite QKD as well. But demonstrating it in use, just removing those barriers going, okay, you understand the problem. I hope you understand that the threat is now. It is not tomorrow. It is the threat is now. This is a solution that you can start to think about and start to deploy. So from our point of view, it's very much demonstrating it out in the real world. So it's the same point. It's the use cases.
I know we've got a lot of very excited cyber specialists in EY who are looking forward to the power of this communication protocol. Roger, maybe if we can come on to you, if that's all right. And the question I want to ask is, if you were charged with getting an organisation convinced to take the plunge into quantum, how would you go about that? What would you get them to do first?
I think the first thing has to be the customer. And just because you're pre-revenue doesn't mean you haven't got a customer. It just means the customer's not paying you yet. But identifying where you're going to make an impact and who you're going to make an impact on is key. So you've mentioned, we've mentioned some of the UK startups, Riverlane with Steve and Evanna, Oxford Quantum Circuits, Carmen and New Quantum. What strikes me is they're passionate not about the technology, but what it can do for somebody. Okay, and I think that's absolutely essential. And the first company I worked for, Rakel, it was a sin to be doing anything in development without the CEO came round. He said, "Who's it for?" So you had to have a vision of a customer, and I think that's true also in organisations like, if you like, the government side now in terms of what we're funding. In that there may not be a customer as such, but you've still got to be focused on the impact. Now, what impact is that technology going to have, not how much money can I spend? You've got to measure the outputs, not the inputs. And it's tough, but I think that's key. I'd also say in a technology like quantum, if you're any complicated business, it's quality, not quantity. I've worked for several businesses where 2/3 of our revenue has come from one customer. And they were sizable business, tens of millions of turnover. So there's a kind of feeling that when you grow a company, you gather more and more customers. But if you're doing something very difficult and slightly exotic, and there's one person out there who really wants you to do it, then that is a business, and it can last for years. But it's nurturing that relationship with the customer, which is absolutely key.
Awesome. Thank you, Roger. We have a question that's come in from the audience. And I guess it's really around the enablers for success. And jump in whoever thinks they can answer this best. But I think the question is, those foundations that are required to get quantum going, get it right, things like cloud, data and security. How advanced are the companies that you're seeing or in terms of those capabilities before they take the step? How far do they need to go? Because we know that there's still evolution in some of these areas. We still have data issues, security issues can be prevalent as well. And there's a number of organizations still moving to cloud. So how ready do we need to be in order to start? Maybe will I ask Nikolaj?
Yeah, I'll give it a crack. I would say that the company that we've been talking to since sort of in November, December timeframe would describe themselves as sort of it's a quantum as a service model, meaning that it's a cloud-based play, and we provide data, they refactor algorithms, they run the algorithms and send them back in a way that we can consume. And that may be a very simplistic way of looking at it, but I don't really want to be in the business, if I can avoid it, of having to build and invest in a large quantum computing infrastructure to support, solving complex analytical problems. I would much rather, as somebody with, the IT budget and the analytics budget under my purview, subcontract with somebody who can build that infrastructure and support, specialized application in my space. So I would imagine that success in that space will favor those that can build and support and enable that kind of infrastructure for companies like ours. But my panelists may have a different point of view.
Roger?
Yeah, I think there's a very glib answer which says at this stage in a new technology, you'll only get somewhere if you've got people who know what they're doing and know what they're talking about. In the sense that it's nowhere near plug and play yet. It's nowhere near the standardization. And that applies to those creating the technology, it applies to those using it. And when we talk about skills, and when we talk about developing skills, and Michael Cuthbert was talking about what National Quantum Computing Centre is doing in that particular space, and it is wider than just computing, It really is that you need people who've got a firm grasp of the fundamentals rather than a firm grasp of the inessentials. You can actually get a long way in business with a firm grasp of the inessentials, but in the early days like this, you really do need people. And I don't mean just quantum physicists, I mean people who absolutely know how you, and quite often they're quite cautious, how you put one step in front of the other and absolutely ground yourself in what is possible, how you don't overpromise, how you set expectations right. And those are all qualities you need to turn good ideas into something which is a real business.
Maybe I'll just add, I think there's also a language issue. So, the quantum computing experts, as we heard from Nikolaj, speak their own language. We speak our own language. It's critical in a partnership, if it's going to be successful, that there are people on both sides that can speak each other's language. I think the external industry needs to hire and recruit people that really understand quantum computing. And it's very important that if someone's looking to work with our industry, that there are people inside those companies that speak our language as well.
Awesome. We have some more questions, but I'm going to pause there or I'll be dragged off stage, which wouldn't be a pretty sight. But I'd like to thank all my panelists. I think my key takeaway from this conversation really is jump in, give it a go, and start your journey. Thank you. Thank you to my panelists.